If these dinosaur remains are only thousands of years old, then it follows that man and dinosaurs must have coexisted in the past. This stone carving in Cambodia is in good condition and appears to represent a Stegosaurus. If you didn't know that dinosaurs died out millions of years before men, wouldn't you think that the stonemason had carved something he had actually seen? Thousands of these clay figurines have been found in New Mexico, dating from around 1000 BC. They appear lifelike and animated to me, but it could be argued that if enough people make clay monsters for long enough, then sooner or later something like a dinosaur will be produced. But what about this Apatosaurus? It is arguably more lifelike than the professional reconstruction. The drawing on the left is from the 1850s and is how paleontologists thought the iguanodon looked based upon the fossil bones. Later they realised that it walked on all four legs, and still later they decided that the tail was used for balance and was therefore held up in the air in a line with the spine. It looks like whoever made the clay figure some 3,000 years ago had it right all along. Perhaps that's because they had actually seen one. Thousands of these engraved Ica burial stones found in Peru depict anatomically correct dinosaurs, as well as surgical procedures such as trepanning. Could this carving in Nepal be a Triceratops? The Nile mosaic from the 1st century AD appears to depict an iguanodon-type creature being hunted. Perhaps the big lizards were hunted to extinction by an increasing human population and habitat loss, much as some animals are today. This dragon motif from a French chateau built in the Middle Ages looks very similar to the Komodo dragon of Southeast Asia. The rendering is accurate and the claws are anatomically correct, so it's possible that whoever carved this had seen the real thing, just like the other examples. If you are bitten by one of these creatures, the wound will become infected and an extreme burning sensation is experienced. This may explain the fire coming from the mouth. Back to the Ark and the early days of recolonizing the earth. The Bible teaches that after some period of time, men travelled from the Ark site to what is now the plains of Mesopotamia, arriving from the east. At this time, they would have all spoken the same language. As the population increased, the cities spread along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The first king was Nimrod, who was a mighty hunter before God, Genesis 10 verse 8, and a great-grandson of Noah. Noah's grandson Mitzrayim founded Egypt. The ruins of Nimrud, which the Arabs call after Nimrod, lies to the south of Nineveh near the Tigris River. At this time mankind had not spread out over the earth as God had instructed Noah to do, and would have therefore retained much of the culture and religious practice which had corrupted the pre-flood earth. Nimrod was in effect the leader of the world. The situation could not be allowed to continue, and when they decided to build the Tower of Babel, possibly some kind of temple to false worship, God confounded their language and divided the population up according to family groups and gave them new languages. This achieved the purpose of making the family groups spread out over the earth and caused the people of the earth to be divided so that there could not be a one world government or religion anymore. These events occurred during the time of a man named Peleg, who was born 100 years after the flood and lived for 240 years. The Bible says the dispersion took place in his days, so assuming 100 years after his birth, it is possible, using secular records, to follow to some degree the speed at which mankind dispersed over the earth. In 331 BC, Alexander defeated the Persian king Darius. He received 1900 years of astronomical observations from the founding of Babylon in 2234 BC. The Egyptian state lasted for 660 years before being conquered by the Persians in 526 BC, so providing a founding date of 2186 BC. And according to the historian Eusebius, the first Greek king began to rule in the city of Sicyon in 2089 BC. Cadiz, on Spain's Atlantic coast, is the oldest city in Europe and is thought to have been founded by the Phoenicians in 1104 BC. The Phoenicians were known to be sea traders and went as far north as Britain for tin and built colonies along the west coast of Africa. In this respect, Cadiz is an important city since it is the gateway to the Atlantic. You can catch the trade winds from here which blow uninterrupted all the way to the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. With this in mind, could the early peoples have travelled much further than secular history allows? I believe they did. If the Phoenicians were able to sail the northern waters of Europe, they could equally have taken the trade winds to America, in some ways a simpler voyage, although longer at 4 to 5 weeks. Traces of nicotine and cocaine have been found in Egyptian mummies. This was first discovered in 1992 by toxicologist Dr. Svetla Balabanova at the Institute of Forensic Medicine in Ulm, Germany. These substances have now been found in 30% of the mummified corpses so examined. Cocaine and tobacco are indigenous to South America and cocaine to the high Andes Mountains. The idea of transatlantic seaborne trade in the ancient world is ridiculed by the academic establishment. But as we have seen, the voyage is not a difficult one. Their problem is that the idea of the ancient world being a global civilization connected by seaborne trade does not fit well with cavemen and evolution, but it does agree with the biblical view. The Los Lunas Decalogue stone found in New Mexico has the Ten Commandments inscribed upon it in Paleo-Hebrew, a script employed by the Phoenicians. When found in the 1880s, this script was unknown to scholars. Similarly, the Bible informs us that during the reign of King Solomon in Israel, he sent out voyages to Tarshish. Now we can't be sure where Tarshish is today, but the cargo includes apes and peacocks, and the port of departure is in the Red Sea. Tarshish must have been in India or Sri Lanka, for that is where these items could be obtained and where the trade winds blow. The round-trip voyage could easily be achieved in a year, departing in the summer and returning in the winter. The Bible says that the voyage was made once every 3 years. So where is he getting all his people from? I am under 50 years old, and in my lifetime the world's population has doubled. It's reckoned to increase by 2% a year. There are no historical records of population growth from secular sources, but there is one in the Bible. Following the exodus of Israel from Egypt, all men between the ages of 20 and 50 were numbered and found to be 603,000. Making some simple assumptions, it is possible to get a figure for the entire population. Firstly, we assume the average lifespan to be 75 years. Those between 20 and 50 represent 30 years of the available 75. The years between birth and 20 years old and 50 years old and death come to 45 years, or 1.5 times the number of years between 20 and 50. Therefore, we can estimate the number of all the males in Israel at 600,000 plus 900,000, giving 1.5 million. If we further assume that the population was equally split between male and female, this gives us a total population of 3 million. We know the starting population was Jacob's family group of 70, and they lived in Egypt for 430 years. The average rate of population growth over the time available to produce about 3 million people is 2.5%. The secular estimates for world population growth is 2.2%, so it looks like the biblical 2.5% figure is reasonable. Now let's apply this average 2.5% growth to Noah's family group of 8 people. The first million is reached in 540 years, 10 million is reached in 650 years, and 50 million after 720 years. Now this is theoretical, of course, but it provides an idea of how quickly population can increase and presents the possibility of a large world population by King Solomon's time. I believe that the population initially grew faster than that because people lived longer. 650 years after the flood, Jacob met the Egyptian pharaoh and described his days as few and evil and less than his ancestors. Yet Jacob is 130 years old. What does he mean? According to biblical chronology, there was a rapid decline in life expectancy after the flood. Noah had to bury his grandson Nahor. This must be attributed to the new climate. the loss of the pre-flood water vapour canopy and its protection from the sun's rays, a poorer diet and increasing genetic faults. The Bible teaches that the pre-flood men lived to over 900 years of age. Under the right conditions and with no genetic faults, why not? Earthquakes and tremors would have continued for many years after the enormous energy released by the flood. See video 1, Genesis and Geomorphology. And this may be another reason for Jacob's complaint. Certainly he was in Egypt because of famine. This might explain the presence of submerged settlements such as this one, Atlet Yam, in Israeli waters. At a depth of 10 meters, it's the same depth as the drowned city of Heraklion between Alexandria and the Nile River in Egypt. There is another post-flood climate issue to consider. Secular climatologists have so far failed to agree on a model for the Ice Age, or Ice Ages, of the Earth. How many ages, when and how caused? The problem for them is that a cooling of the Earth will not by itself bring about an ice age, because there will be less precipitation, snowfall. Cold air holds less water. In the summertime, what snow there is will melt. Snow needs to accumulate year on year for large glaciers and ice sheets to be formed. But everybody agrees that they were formed, and they agree on the extent of the ice sheets. The requirements for an ice age, then, are large amounts of snowfall and no summer. Those conditions would have existed for many years after the flood. The sea, warmed by the thousands of volcanoes which erupted during the flood, produced large quantities of water vapour, which then fell as rain and snow. The atmosphere would have been heavily polluted by volcanic dust released at the beginning of the flood, blocking out the sun and causing a permanent winter in what are now the temperate latitudes. The distribution of the ice would also have channeled the migration of people and animals. The meteorologist Michael Ord estimates the post-flood ice age lasted between 500 and 700 years. It is estimated that the sea level during the Ice Age was 130 metres below its present level. Notice how most of the land surfaces are connected when you reduce the sea level by this amount. Europe is no longer totally cut off from Britain, and today dredgers and trawlers bring up tools, hunting implements and the bones of dinosaurs and mammals from the bottom of the North Sea. The unbiblical claim that the ice ages lasted tens of thousands of years and occurred hundreds of millennia ago rests upon the idea that the many layers of ice found in an ice sheet are annual layers. It is true that variations in temperature cause ice layering, but it does not follow that these are annual. In the 1980s, an expedition was mounted to recover some aeroplanes which, having run out of fuel, were forced to land on an ice sheet in Greenland during the Second World War. After less than 50 years, they were buried under 260 feet of ice, which had thousands of layers in it. Ice layering depends upon the conditions, not the amount of time.